Hi everyone. With this video, what we're going to do is wrap up the color channel, or the color map, for our building. And with that, I'm going to be doing some fixes to the roof. I don't like the color of this. It's too dull. I have an ambient occlusion going on the wrong side where this is not, the roof doesn't exist. And this is blank, so we're going to fix all those things. You'll notice I do have a little fancy keyboard here, so you guys hopefully can follow along a little better. I'm always trying to add new tools to make your learning experiences better. So let's see what we can do. In here, I'm going to delete that so you guys can see what I'm doing. Whoop. Just make sure I have the whole group and contents gone. Okay. I have, since our last video, organized the roof section in its own little folder. Remember, that's just by hitting Control and G to make a group. I'm going to also duplicate this entire group of objects and move that up and rotate it around. So to do that, remember that is going to be Control D. Oops, I'm thinking Maya. I'm just going to do a duplicate group. So just right click duplicate group, and I'm going to hit the V key, and V key allows for you to move. So I just have to tap that. Now that I have the move tool selected, I can hold down the shift key and left mouse button up, so I can drag that over to here. Now it's upside down, so if I hit Control T for transform, I can hold down the shift key and left mouse button and drag that and have that snap. So it's a 180-degree rotation. And now I'm just going to use my move tool again by tapping the V key and dragging this into position. So now if I look at this, I have some issues. It's hard to see where the UVs are. So I'm going to fix that by double clicking on the stroke. And now that I have this open, I'm going to change my stroke color to something much more obvious. So I'm going to use like a neon green so I can see it a little bit better. Now that I have that, I can see where these edges of the stroke are. That's why I like to use stroke on that. I can change that as I go. Now I'm going to use the V key to move again, and I'm going to move this down. Notice how slow that's moving. So as I tap that down arrow, it's slowly moving. If I hold down the shift key and the down arrow, it's going to move that by a much greater increment. And so what I'm doing is I'm either tapping V and then using an arrow, or I'm tapping V and then holding down shift and an arrow to get my objects in position of where they need to be. And this looks actually pretty smack dab where it needs to be. I like it. I don't like that I have a front and back of my house that are exactly the same. So I'm going to fix that. Inside of my house front, we're going to call that back. And I'm going to get rid of the copy. So double click on that text again. Delete that. There we go. I'm going to open this up. And I got to go to my door. And I'm hoping that I actually labeled stuff. Some of this is labeled, some of it isn't. Make sure before you submit for your final, make sure you do that for me. I'm going to delete all those. And now I have one of the doors gone. I want to have another window. So I see I have a number of windows here. There's the window I want to duplicate. So I'm just going to select that and right click, duplicate group, hit OK. And using the V key, hold down shift. So tap V, hold down shift, and use the arrow keys again. So this is going to get us our second window. And we're trying to match that up as best as possible. So these distances are equivalent, and so that means here's this one. I'm going to move this over. Zoom out. That's looking pretty good. So maybe that's not how it would look in the real world. I think that's going to look okay for what I'm doing. Now I already have the bricks, so I don't even need to worry about much. I can hit save. So I'm going to go to my UVs, turn that off, Control S. And now in Maya, there they are. I've got the other side. Didn't have to do really any work to get that over there, except for getting rid of the door and duplicating a window. Let's fix the top. So inside of my ambient occlusion, this is what's causing that problem, because I have the roof line, or not the roof line, but the roof that is using an ambient occlusion that is showing me my fireplace, or not my fireplace, my chimney. So I need to get rid of that. So what I'm going to end up doing here is just go from here to there. I'm going to select white tone. So go to the white. And I'm just going to press Shift F5. So if I press Shift F for 5, it's going to get rid of that color. Or I could have gone to Edit Fill. So both of those will give me a fill. Now if I hit Control S, let me get rid of my UVs again, Control S. Now I know I don't have that shadow that I really liked that was there, but I do no longer have another problem. So that problem's gone. Pretty good. Now I know my shingles aren't matching up 100%, and that's kind of really terrible looking if we think about how a roof line would be on a house. So to be able to fix that, that's actually a pretty easy thing to do to get our shingles to match up. First thing we need to do is locate where the top and bottom of our shingles are. And right now, if that's the shadow of the underside, we're just going to make sure that the shadow of the underside is showing the same direction. Yes, so it is in the proper top-down position here, but the problem is that you have little tiny shingles and then big ones. Easy way to fix that. If I go into my roof, and if I select the roof material, or the texture, the roof image, sorry, I'm going to go and select this. So I'm grabbing a line, and basically I'm trying to find a line of these shingles that are as straight as possible so I can recycle these. So I'm going to grab all these, Control C, Control V, and in my layout, I know that the top is over here, and that's why we have this dip going on. So it's hard to see them right now, but I know that I have these selected because I copied and pasted it. So if I hold down the Shift and the arrow key drag down, what that's doing is it's dragging it straight down because I have that Shift selected. I'm going to move that over to here. And let's look at what this did. Okay, a little bit of different shading. That's okay. As a matter of fact, it looks like this was a duplicate of another section because this is a repeating texture. That's okay. The main thing I want to get rid of is the fact that these two shingles are stacked on top of each other. You would be fired if you were a roofer and did this, because what you're doing is preventing this to be a waterproof section of our roof. So what we can do to fix that, I also noticed that I only selected a little bit of it. Let me delete that. Let me make sure I actually do a proper job here. I have to go all the way to the end of this. So I'm going to grab my marquee selection tool. And I'm going to go across. Let's use this one. All the way to the end. Control C, Control V. And now hold down Shift. Left mouse, drag down. Okay. Now that I have that, let me move this down a little bit more. Looking a little bit better, but they're still overlapped a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my, let's see, okay, I'm going to grab the Control T to do a move, and I didn't have to do Control T. I could just do a V. So either of those are your transform. Hold down Shift and just tap the left or right arrow key and Shift, and what that's doing is just offsetting this a little bit for me. So I actually want to offset it a little bit. I had a lot of shadow over on that side. I don't want that to happen. I think that's pretty good here. And I know it's cutting off over there. That's fine. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to grab that now and go in the opposite direction. So holding down Shift and arrow key, and put this under that one now, so I can have the front one and the back one. Now you can see this kind of pulling out from that right there. And that's looking pretty good. Now, let's address a spot right here. You can see this is dipping down and is lining up a little bit too much for my liking. So let's fix that by going into the roof. I'm going to hide these. Let's go into that roof layer. I'm also going to increase the stroke on our UV so we can just see those boundaries a little bit better while I'm talking. So I'm going to increase that to 3 or 6. Okay, that's fine. So it's a little bit easier to see these. If I grab the roof texture, go to Edit, Puppet Warp. It's kind of subtle, but you can see these polygons that have gone across this whole thing. I'm going to pin by just left-clicking the corners. And what this is doing, if I grab this one over here and start to move it, it's basically allowing me to, almost like cloth, stretch this thing around. It's called Puppet Warp because if you were to pin the areas, like the pivot points, and then rotate, it's kind of like a crude puppet. I think that's why they use that term. So what I'm trying to do here is straighten out my bricks, or not my bricks, my shingles, because it was dipping down too far in one spot, and it's dipping down a little bit too far right here too. So I'm going to put a pin there and drag down. I like it. I think that's going to be a lot better. I'm not even worried that this isn't filling that whole area right here, because if I hit enter and allow that Puppet Warp to pin all that stuff in place, if I show these other two pieces here, good. They are now allowing this to overlap. So that's nice. Still an issue though, because these right here are lining up. So if I go to that layer right here, and then I'm going to just copy, if I hold down shift and drag, I want that to look offset. So I'm going to offset that one. And then again, we go to this one and see if I can offset that one. There we go. So that looks a little bit more realistic of what shingles should be on there. It looks like it's just deforming as it goes over to that side. That's what the issue of photographing reference. There's always going to be distortion. You can't ever really 100% take a photograph of something head on. But this is pretty good. So let's see what that did for our texture. I'm going to hit Control S. And I'm going to go back to Maya. Hey, that looks a lot more realistic of how the top of a roof line would be. So that's good. What I don't like still is the colors. It's still dull. It doesn't feel like it matches what I have here. So what I'm going to do is try to fix that with some simple things. I'm actually going to take all these and group these down within that group and just call that shingles. And now that I have that, let's first do a new layer. And I'm going to hit the I key. That's going to do a ink drop so I can try, or eyedrop. And eyedrop is to sample colors. And I want to sample like a light gray. Now that I have that, I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to hold down the control key. No, we're just going to do this vanilla. We're going to go totally the most easiest way. We're going to use a rectangular marquee selection tool, left click drag. And now that I have this, I'm going to do another edit fill. We're shift F5. Now that I have that, it's going to fill up everything on there. And I'm going to change my blend mode. Let's try to go through a couple of these until we find something we like. And so I am going through... Overlay. That gave me some cool colors on there. However, I don't feel that overlay is... it's a little too dark maybe. So let's, before we decide... Control S. Go to Maya. Yeah. A little too dark. But I think I'm onto something with this. Let's try and take that again. And just go into my opacity. Let's knock that back to maybe 66%. So here's what is off, and that's what is on. Control S. And now, much better. I like that. Okay, we're pretty much done with our colors on our house. Now, this is a newer house that I'm building here, so I don't really have a lot of grime and grunge, but I'm going to show you guys how we can change some of that. Now that I have everything ready to go, I have my roof, I have my shingles. The only thing I forgot, actually, before I put the grime and grunge on, is a little hole for my chimney. And to do that is a pretty simple thing to do by, I'm going to go to my roof and the bricks. I'm going to call that chimney. I'm going to grab all of this right here from the top down. So I'm going to make a new layer. Go to here. Oops. I just want to marquee select. So I'm going to just left click, drag across here. And now that I have that, I'm going to go and sample a light color. So this should work right here. So I'm just putting this in, going to edit, fill again. And let's change that blend mode. Let's do an overlay again. This time we're really going to knock that back. Okay. So what we're doing is just giving a little bit more definition to this top part. Standing that out. And then this top part right here, this is not how a brick top would be. If we look at what Maya's actually showing us, it's going straight across. It's not actually giving me a hole. So I'm gonna fake that in a very quick way here. I'm gonna grab the rock. I'm gonna sample one of these. I don't even need, let's go around that much. So I'm gonna hit Control C, Control V. And I'm gonna pull that. Yep, that's so here's our let me just make sure I have that labeled. Overlay. And this is our top brick. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna move that up to here. I also want to make sure I hit Control T and make it so it's sized within the size of my top of the bricks, or the top of the chimney. So now that I have that, right click, duplicate layer, and hold down Shift and drag with your left mouse button down. And I have two of these. Now that I have that, I can even hold down the Alt key and drag up. And notice it actually made a duplicate of the layer. So I could right click duplicate or hold down Alt and drag and it'll make a duplicate. I have that. I'm going to hit Control T and rotate while holding down Shift. And bring that over here and scale it. So we're going to scale holding down Shift, Enter, and hold down the Alt key and start to drag and hold down Shift to duplicate that one. And now I have this. Okay. Now that we have something like this, so we have the top bricks. Let's go underneath that top brick and make one more layer. And we are going to just drag across right here. And I am going to use a gradient fill. Or just a gradient. And I'm going to go from one color to another. And I want one of these, so I'm going to click right here, to be dark. And I want the other one to be even darker. Okay. Now this is set to give me a gradient that goes from left to right, or a linear gradient. I'm going to use a radial gradient. So I'm going to click in the middle and drag outwards. And that's looking pretty good. I notice I'm still not on the very bottom of that because you'll notice this gradient is peeking out through underneath this top brick. I'm going to drag that down one more. And let's zoom out. Okay. The colors might be a little too much. I'm just going to take that and then do one more gradient fill. I'm going to click on that color. And I'm going to use, instead of that blue, it's super saturated. So I want to desaturate that color and make it a little bit darker. Okay. And I'm going to just drag that out again. Whoops. Make sure you hold down. I'm going to just Control, click on that. You need it so it's only this, because if I go beyond that, it's going to spill all over the place. So I basically made that marquee selection happen again by holding on Control and clicking on that layer. Now if I click that, okay, that's better. Now I can fancy that up a little bit more with these top bricks by adding some shadows on them. And I'm just going to go to here under effects, and I'm going to add a Bevel and emboss. Okay. I'm going to copy this. Layer style. And I'm going to grab all these other top bricks and paste that. Okay. That's a little bit better. Let's see what that did for us for our texture. So I'm going to turn off UVs. Control S. And we're going to go to Maya. Okay. Now, that side brick, if I wanted to go a little bit further than that, easy thing to do, because it's starting to not match 100%. I'm just going to grab these top bricks. So one of these is all I need. So I'm going to grab that one. And again, I'm going to duplicate that layer. So I'm going to hold down Alt and arrow key down, and that'll duplicate it. Now I have this going on. And I'll actually hit Control T, and I'm going to scale that using Shift. Now you'll notice when I do that, it blurs out. So let's just hold down Alt and arrow key to duplicate it instead. It was a nice idea, but it didn't work. A lot of the time, texturing, and this is, being an artist, showing mom and dad something you did on YouTube as a tutorial and just following it point by point. Not exactly being an artist, it's being someone who's able to play follow the leader. Being an artist means that you are making these decisions of how to create things on your own. Very important. It's just as important as not having a portfolio that just has a bunch of anime in it. As a matter of fact, that's probably the most important thing ever. I'm joking. It is important, though. You want figure drawing and not anime. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. I know there's some little glitches there, but if we zoom out, that's pretty nice. So now that I have all this, let's add a little bit of grunge to this so I can show you guys how to do that. You don't need to add this to all of your models, but this is an easy way to make it feel a little bit more realistic, because moss and dirt, it goes everywhere, and it's an easy thing to make. So I'm going to actually go and select all these things, Control G, and this is going to be my house color. Now that I have that, I'm going to make a new layer. Let's call that grunge. And what we're going to do here is go into our brush tool. Now, this is better with a Wacom tablet. I don't have that right now hooked up, and I don't really need to do that. I can actually use these to simulate some of this stuff. So just a pen swipe. So what I'm going to do here is reduce my flow, and that's looking pretty good. What I want to do is change this to a color that makes sense for moss. So I'm going to go to a dark green. And now that I have dark green, and I'm not going to do this for the whole house because I don't want to have you guys watch this entire step by step. I want, it's pretty easy once you see how this goes. I'm going to go into my effects, and I want to put a bevel and emboss on this. And I'm going to increase my highlight mode, and I'm actually going to make that kind of a limeish green. Okay, now if I paint this, and that's obviously not how moss would grow, but if I paint this like that, look at that. We need to tweak it. It's a little bit more like a texture you'd see in a video game from the 90s. So we want to mess around with some of these values. My multiply should have a dark green added to it. Now you'll notice it looks a little bit better. I can also add some pattern overlay to this. And what the pattern overlay is going to do, that's actually like a plant. I'm not even sure how I got that to show up. I haven't used that one before. I'm going to go into the default patterns. So restore default patterns. I don't know why that went to that one here. Okay, if this is the new Photoshop, that's really weird. I'm just trying to find something. So there's a grass one that you could use. I'm going to decrease my opacity of this pattern. I don't think it really should be that obvious. So if I reduce that, I now have the green. I have a little bit of texture on that. I can also change that scale. There we go. All right, I'm going to say that that's okay. All right, so now I can paint a little bit of mossy moss around the edges of my building. And again, I have my flow really low, and I also can use things like my eraser to clean up some of these areas if it gets a little bit too gnarly. So that's an easy way to get some nice stuff going here. So and of course these newer Kyle brushes are throwing me off because there's so many different ways that we can get those to be used. I'm going to use this where's eraser? I'm going to get out of eraser and natural edge, cartoonist. Let's see. Let's use natural edge. I'm going to go big and reduce my flow. And I'm also going to go and I'll click on my brush options and not let it show up for, there we go. It's loading on my other monitor. And I'm going to reduce the spacing on that. And now that I have this, close that up. I can kind of pull back some of these spots that might be a little bit too much for me. So easy ways to add some moss and fun stuff like that just by playing around with some of these settings and having fun. Bob Ross it, you know, you got happy little moss everywhere. Now we can get really weird with this, and instead of it being moss, we can have, I don't know, some police tape somewhere, some fun stuff like that. So this is how we can get more organic looking stuff built into here. And I'm knocking that back quite a bit because that was a little bit too much. But just by having some of these spots on here, I'm going to drop down my opacity on this tool because it is big. There we go. Just by having a little bit of this grungy textures applied to this, it feels way more real than if we were just to paint out some colors on this and then say we're done. We're adding Mother Nature essentially. So digital Mother Nature. So now I'm not going to do that all the way. Another thing that's very easy to do, I'm going to use another layer. Man, we're going to call this dirt. And I'm going to use just a light brown. And I'm going to color pick like a brown. And I hate that brush. All these Kyle brushes are sometimes unpredictable when I'm so accustomed to the older brushes from earlier P-Shop. So there we go. I'm going to use this one, and I'm also going to no, I don't want to use that one. So give me a soft round. There we go. I'm going to change the soft round to being my brush tool. And what I want to do with this is my opacity is very low. I like that. What I'm going to do is hit some of these spots like shadows. So dirt and shadows. So B, and I'm going to hold down Shift and left click drag. B, left click drag. Just little spots like this. I'm knocking back some shadow on the door. Maybe even some spots here. I'm not worried if I make a mistake because I can use the eraser tool, knock down how much the flow of the eraser tool is and my opacity of that, and then just kind of pull back some of those spots if it feels like I'm hitting that up a little too much. So that's an easy way to make our buildings feel even more realistic. So we're just pushing shadows. We're pushing the idea that dirt and some other stuff has been going on in here. If I hit save, Control S on that, and bring that into here, you'll notice that right away. Notice how that's starting to look. That's so much better than just by making your vanilla setting of I made a shape, I made color on it. Well, make it feel like it's been lived in. And so this is absolutely doing those little ideas right here. So play around with these settings. It's great. All right, let's play around with making the final pieces in our last video of this series, which is going to be adding the bump maps and some specular for our windows. So I'll see you guys in the last video of this series.